welcome everyone to this final webinar session of the Voluntary Sector Expo. We're really glad that you could join us. A really very warm welcome to all who have been able to join us for this first 2022 Voluntary Expo for Wiltshire. Wessex Community Action have coordinated this week alongside the Small Charity Week, especially given that the makeup of the voluntary and community sector is largely small charities. So the expo has been put together by Wessex Community Action to showcase the great work that charities and voluntary and community organisations do in delivering those really essential frontline services, supports and activities and events for residents in Wiltshire. The Voluntary Sector Expo is a real opportunity for anyone and everyone to get a flavour of the length and breadth of what it is that we do and the massive contribution that the sector makes to civil society and especially to the health and well-being of our residents in the county. So today we're going to be hearing from Healthwatch Wiltshire. Linda Webb will be joining us, from Zero Chippenham with Dr. Nick Murray. We'll be hearing also from the Chippenham Cycle Network, Laurence Campbell, and from Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, Damian Haasjes. So I'd now like to invite Linda from Healthwatch Wiltshire to open today's session. Over to you, Linda.
So first and foremost, who are we and what do we do? So Healthwatch Wiltshire is your health and social care champion. Whatever service you use, whether that's GPs, dentists, hospitals, we want to hear about your experiences. That also includes social care as well. We're completely independent. We have the power to make sure that NHS leaders and other decision makers listen to our feedback, the feedback we collect, and go on to improve standards of care. We can also help you to find reliable and trustworthy information and advice, and a lot of that is through our website, but it's also, if people were to get in touch with us, we have a hub team which can answer your questions and help point you in the right direction of the services that you need to access. Healthwatch Wiltshire is actually part of a huge network of 150 local Healthwatch teams across England, and that's sort of governed by, if you like, Healthwatch England. We ourselves, we're a small team of 4, but we have about 40 volunteers that support us in our work. So quite a lot of voluntary support, which is brilliant, and they're all excellent. So who do we work with? The main people are health and care organisations. So this would be Bath and North East Somerset, Swindon and Wiltshire Clinical Commissioning Group, soon to become the Integrated Care Board, as you may know, Wiltshire Council, and other organisations which include hospital trusts and Avon and Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership NHS Trust, who we run our mental health forum through. Aside from that, it's people like yourselves, so voluntary, community and social enterprise groups. We also work quite closely with other Healthwatch teams, particularly those from Swindon, Bath and North East Somerset, but also a lot across the south of England as well. So it's kind of not limited to just Wiltshire. And of course, our army of volunteers are really important in all of that, and you. So that's it. There's quite a lot of people that are involved in our work, which is brilliant. So what does our work involve? Essentially, we use your feedback to try and understand the challenges that are facing the NHS and other care providers. There are 3 ways that you can get in touch with us. That's just by contacting us by phone, by email or online. We have a Have Your Say form on our website, for example. Talking to us at events, so we're out and about as much as we can, starting to get out a bit more now. And we also do a lot of surveys about specific topics, which of course, you know, anyone can complete. And that might be online or it might be a paper survey, depending on, or might even be over the phone actually, depending on what sort of things that we're looking for. What we then do is we produce reports from these findings and we make recommendations to organisations, to care providers, to the NHS, to make improvements to services. And based on these recommendations, we then sort of go back to them a few months later or a year later to see what work's been done and what changes have been made in that time. And there's a few examples of the things that we've done recently. And you can see there's quite a lot of collaborative stuff there where we've worked with Wiltshire Service Users Network on a survey about for people living with autism and about their experiences of services. We also worked with Wiltshire SIL and Wiltshire Parent Council on mental health support, where we were talking to people with lived experience of mental ill health. And we also, our young Healthwatch Wiltshire, so we have a kind of some young volunteers, they wanted to work on a project looking at LGBTQ support in Wiltshire for young people. And that was their project in the bottom right-hand corner. And more recently, which is not published yet, but we've also done a survey of how people accessed GPs during the pandemic. This was a kind of collaborative thing with lots of Healthwatch teams across the south of England. And we're hoping to publish this report soon. It's basically talking to patients, but also talking to staff as well to see how they coped with things and what they would do to improve anything going forward. And the other aspect of our work, as I touched upon, is advice, information and signposting. So our website offers quite a lot of this sort of information. We publish on new articles on there quite regularly, just to keep you up to date with the latest changes in health and social care. And we've got a figure there from this last year, 6,802 visits to just that section of our website. And I think a lot of that was down to people wanting to know information during the pandemic. And obviously the vaccine and where to get support for your mental health were the most frequently visited pages. The guide to mental health, which was something that our mental health forum produced, has been downloaded 408 times in the last year, which is incredible. And that's a really valued sort of thing that we kind of appreciate, that people need that kind of information. So yeah, if you need help finding a service, you can contact our hub team for help. And over the whole network, so across England, this kind of service supported 1 million people. So it's something really worthwhile. But how do we make a difference? So thanks to this feedback from local people, we in Wiltshire have been able to improve services, and these have included specialist dementia training for care home staff, and more groups for people living with dementia. This was kind of a big project that we did, looking at how we could improve community groups. And this has involved talking to people living with dementia and saying, what would you like? They also mentioned at the time that they thought care home staff could do with some specialist training with dementia. So we were able to organise that with Wiltshire Care Partnership, which was fantastic. The other things that we've done, so recently our young Healthwatch volunteers have been, they reviewed lots of websites offering support, mental health support to young people. And off the back of that, they were then invited back to say, well, we're developing these websites, could you help us? So that was a really nice thing to kind of get involved with. And most recently, Great Western Hospital in Swindon, we did a big project there last summer where we went in to speak to people in the emergency department and on wards to ask what they thought of the hospital and what they would like to see improved. And this little infographic here just shows some of the things, I'm not sure whether you can see it, but it shows some of the things that they suggested that have actually been changed by the hospital since then, which is really great for them to sort of demonstrate that they've improved things, but also shows how the feedback that's been shared has actually made differences. And it can be very, very small changes. It can be things like patients were saying that they couldn't sleep at night, but it was because of a noisy bin. So they removed the noisy bin in the ward and have it with a soft close bin now. So it was little things like that that meant that they get a better night's sleep. So it's a really powerful way of being able to demonstrate how feedback is important, and it's not just a question of saying, oh well, why should I bother saying anything, but actually it really does make changes, which is really good to see. So what's next for us? Just a kind of something that we're looking towards now for next year. And these are our kind of priorities that have been, basically, we've kind of arrived at these priorities because these are the things that people talk to us about the most. And we've got primary care as kind of number one, which is obviously GP surgeries and that kind of thing, dentistry. We've done quite a lot of work on that in the past year, but there will be a lot more to do. And I think what we're hoping to do is grow our sort of engagement with GP surgeries, primary care networks, and work out how we can support them in kind of bringing about some of the improvements that we'd identified during the pandemic. Mental health, we want to focus more on learning disabilities and autism again, and people who are neurodivergent as well. Children and young people, this was more of a focus on sexual health. This is something that has been chosen by our young volunteers to follow up. And hospital discharge, that had been in our plan for last year, but didn't really happen because of the pandemic. And now we want to look a bit more closely at different aspects of how people are discharged from hospital, and especially if they go through social care processes and that kind of thing. And obviously we're expecting lots of changes with the new integrated care system coming in, and we kind of want to make sure that the public still has a say in what happens in these changes. We've had a lot of success with our mental health forum. This is really well attended. We have some brilliant sort of guest speakers come along in all different backgrounds, all different organisations. So we kind of want to continue that success. And the final thing is obviously getting out and about more, that we haven't done that much lately, and we'd like to do that and really kind of get back on the map a little bit more. And the whole face-to-face thing is something we very much missed, and is obviously quite a huge part of our work, gathering feedback. So yeah, that would be a great thing to be doing once again. And that's it. If you have any questions, I can answer them, hopefully.
Very much, Linda. Great presentation, and thanks for being so succinct. It's amazing, actually, the things that really stood out for me were the number of your volunteers and the number of young volunteers that you've got within that as well, which is great to hear. Often quite difficult to engage our younger volunteers. So, and it's really lovely to hear about the interface between the healthcare providers and the residents, beneficiaries, you know, being able to offer that independent voice to residents, helping improve and shape services. So great to hear from you. So Sarah, I'm just wondering if we've got any questions from the participants today in the panel.
Yes, hello Linda. Hi, just to start, do you share your reports of feedback with the voluntary and community sector, as well as statutory services, so they could potentially use it for evidence?
Well, we certainly can do. I mean, I think generally, first and foremost, it goes to the people that we've been that have been involved in the projects, or it's who we've kind of done the project about. But there's no reason why we couldn't share it with you if there's an easy way to do that. Such as through like a newsletter or that kind of thing, then happy to help.
Okay, lovely. And just one last question. What do you do when you follow up this work, just to see if, so when you follow up to see if changes have been made based on your feedback, and then changes haven't been made, what do you do then?
That's a very good question. It's probably more a case of kind of checking in with people, and if they haven't made changes, to say, well, we then sort of work out, well, why hasn't this happened? And there may be a number of reasons why something hasn't changed. You know, we can't necessarily set the time frame for a care provider or an NHS organisation. They might well have their own time frames. But if we do check in and it hasn't happened, it's more a question of saying, well, if it's not now, when do you think it might be? And then we go back again at that point. So it's kind of one of those things where we're keeping an eye on things all of the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Lovely. Thank you very much. I'll hand you back to Amber.
Thanks, Linda. And just on the point of sharing, Wessex Community Action are really happy to share reports through our newsletters. We have a wide coverage, and obviously Healthwatch are a part of our new Voluntary Sector Leadership Alliance, looking at the healthcare, integrated healthcare system at the moment. So really happy to distribute anything. I just thought I'd make a note. Actually, I think, you know, I think Healthwatch is a little bit like a household name like CAB, and often we don't know that you're a charity, you know, so this has been a great opportunity to have you here and just share with us what you have today. So hope you'll stay for the rest of the presentations, Linda. And I'm now going to invite Dr. Nick Murray to come in and talk about Zero Chippenham. So over to you, Nick.
Okay, right. So hello, everybody. I thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Nick Murray. I chair Zero Chippenham, which is a community group taking practical action on combating climate change. I'll go down to the next slide. I'm going to start talking about what the background is to the topic and why it's important, and then talk about briefly other groups that are also working on this agenda, just to set the scene of what's going on around Chippenham. And then go on to Zero Chippenham projects and what we're doing specifically. So climate change is real, it's already happening. It threatens our future, our children's future, the future of many species with whom we share the planet. The implications are potentially devastating in terms of food, water, ecosystems, extreme weather, and irreversible changes, all of which have serious consequences for our security and way of life. The latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change IPCC report tells us that the impacts are appearing faster and will get more severe sooner than expected. But we already know that, so why am I repeating it? Well, Professor Kevin Anderson of the Tyndall Centre summed it up when he said we're all suffering from cognitive dissonance. In other words, we acknowledge climate change as an existential threat whilst behaving as though it isn't. And that, of course, there can only ultimately be one rational outcome that relieves this dilemma, which is to stop burning fossil fuels and take the other necessary steps to prevent global heating. So back in October 2018, the IPCC published another report, which is really, really important, about 1.5 degrees, saying that 2 degrees was no longer safe and we need to limit average global temperature rise to 1.5, which means approximately half the 2010 emissions by 2030 and a net zero emissions by 2050. So basically, as you can see on that graph, cutting carbon emissions drastically and very fast. Of course, a lot's happened since 2018, school strikes, Extinction Rebellion, David Attenborough, documentaries and Greta Thunberg, and the government's announced new policies to attempt to keep up with the UK's carbon budgets, and numerous councils have declared climate emergencies, including here in Wiltshire. The UK itself has reduced its territorial emissions by about half between 1990 and 2020 and became the first major economy to set a binding target for net zero. All good then? Well, not really. Climate change is a global issue and carbon emissions don't recognise borders. So whilst globally emissions dipped in 2020, as you can see on that graph, they are now back on a pre-COVID upwards trajectory. According to the IPCC's sixth assessment report published last year, average global temperature is likely to exceed 1.5 in the mid-2030s. Just ahead of the climate change conference, COP26, the UN produced a report that said we were heading for a 2.7 degrees rise, which would be devastating for everything, including our healthcare, which we just talked about earlier. And even if that's even if the national pledges that were made at the Paris COP were implemented, which they're not going to be. So did the COP26 turn things around? Unfortunately not, because countries like China, India, Russia are preventing agreement on anything like the emissions reductions that we need. And for all the talk of keeping 1.5 alive, COP26 failed to even get agreement on securing the end of coal, which is the most obvious step in keeping it alive. At COP26, there were also inspiring speeches by people from indigenous communities and pleas from the island nations who will be the first to disappear when sea level rises. And for the first time I'm aware of, there was a full-on climate protest march inside the conference itself, separated from the outside by steel fences and UN security guards. But I think it's this upsurge in community power that gives us room for hope. It's clear that the UN process isn't going to solve this on its own, and post COP26 it's estimated we're still heading for well over 22 degrees of heating, still well short of where we need to be. So being realistic and as optimistic as possible, keeping temperature rise to 2 degrees may be the best we can achieve, but even that's going to be a huge challenge. The industrialised countries, including the UK, have got a historic responsibility to take a lead, and working together have a significant influence on the rest of the world. So we need to press our politicians, take what action we can, and be more accepting to changes in our own way of life, the need for solar farms and wind turbines, for example, if we're going to succeed. Cities, regions, institutions, businesses, communities, individuals all need to do what they can in spite of government, and we need to move up a gear to treat climate change as the emergency it actually is. Fossil fuel-based electricity, heating and transport are the major contributors to greenhouse gases, which translates into a requirement for energy efficiency, renewable energy and heat, sustainable transport, as well as sustainable food systems and carbon sequestration through land management and reforestation. There's a huge amount going on locally, as you can see from this slide, from government to voluntary sector groups and campaigning organisations. Wiltshire Council itself published a climate strategy, which includes becoming carbon neutral as an organisation by 2030 and seeking to decarbonise the rest of the county. Delivery plans have yet to be devised, however, and the council is coming under pressure from its own climate emergency task group and groups such as the Wiltshire Climate Alliance to reduce the need for commuting and car dependency, implement net zero planning policies, invest in active travel and EV charging infrastructure, and generate renewable energy and plant trees on its own land and enable others to do so. Towns and parishes are also engaging, and Chippenham Town Council is investing in energy efficiency and renewable energy in its own buildings, and has got a big tree planting programme going. Charities and voluntary groups are also working hard, which I'll come on to in a minute. So I'm going wrong direction. There we go. So there are lots of groups. I'm just going to touch on a few of the ones which are making an impact locally. So Even Needs Trees, there's a tree planting charity which was established in 2018 with the objective of creating permanent woodlands throughout the Avon catchment. It's already planted more than 20,000 saplings and preserving existing woodland. It's got two woodlands, one at Hazeland, which is near Carn, 34 acres, and another one at Pudding Brook, which is just outside of Chippenham, 14 acres, and it's currently looking at its third purchase. The Cycle Network Development Group is a voluntary group which is working with the neighbourhood plan and engaging with Wiltshire Council on its local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and that's going to be subject to a separate presentation after this. The Wiltshire Climate Alliance is an umbrella group for community groups campaigning for action on climate change, working on multiple fronts, including acting as a critical friend and sometimes an outright critic of Wiltshire Council, and in future of Wiltshire-based businesses as well, in pressing for urgent and more stronger and more urgent action. And Zero Chippenham, who I'm representing today, is a community group focused on practical action on climate change. We've got 5 key areas of focus: renewable energy, sustainable transport, clean air, trees, and community engagement. So going through those in turn. Community energy, we're working with Eden Renewables and Bath and West Community Energy on a community share in a solar energy scheme near Chippenham. So we'll allow people to buy shares in renewable energy and to get return on those shares, and also to get community benefits through a community fund and to sort of help make the scheme happen. We're also running something called a community solar panel discount scheme, which encourages local residents and businesses to install solar panels on their roofs. And we're working with Chippenham schools to support the installation of PV on their buildings. The community panel solar discount scheme is worth a little bit more explanation. So it's a scheme that works with residents and businesses to help them produce their own clean energy. It negotiated with high quality installers to secure a discount on market prices of potentially up to 20%. And perhaps most importantly, it provides local people with peace of mind that some of the hard work has already been done for them. The scheme now operates in Carn as well, and Royal Wootton Bassett, and is due to be expanded further in Wiltshire. On the sustainable transport front, we focus very much on electric vehicles and other electric mobility, since we've already got a separate cycle network group in the town. The focus has been on raising awareness of the benefits of electric vehicles through promotional events, including a recent webinar in association with the Town Council, helping people to understand how they can swap over to electric vehicles. We're working hard with schools as well to try and get them to install charge points in the car parks, and we're working with a local community energy group as a partner on a community EV charge point scheme where people who don't have off-street parking can charge their vehicles. On the air quality side, our aim is to raise awareness and monitor air pollution to reduce the health impacts of vehicle emissions, especially on children, because it's a very localised issue. We are planning to install monitoring diffusion tubes in local pollution hotspots, which all had to go on hold when COVID struck because the traffic volume dropped. And we've got an air quality, we've got some mobile air quality monitoring equipment which we're using with schools, running clubs and other organisations to see which routes are the most polluted routes and what we can do about it. We're actually looking for volunteers to reinvigorate this project post-COVID if there's anybody that's interested. On tree planting, we've been working with the NFU and the Woodland Trust on a tree planting scheme that's resulted in hundreds of trees being planted on land belonging to local farmers and landowners. We're working with the Town Council, and we planted around 800 trees at Stanley Park Sports Ground. We're applying for grants to enable more tree planting on local land. And in the past, we provided free trees to local residents, which is something that the Chippenham Town Council might be doing itself in the future. Just to say a little bit more about the tree planting scheme. So it relies on the local landowners, which are principally farmers, donating small and generally unproductive areas of land, corners of field, for example, for tree planting. Zero Chippenham provides the volunteers to plant the trees, and we cover the costs of doing the surveys, tree guards and mulch mats that are needed. The Woodland Trust donates the trees under its More Trees scheme, and the scheme ensures generally that trees are planted that would not otherwise be planted. So, and it brings local benefits as well as global benefits. We're always keen to hear from anybody who's interested in donating land for tree planting or helping to fund the scheme or volunteering to help plant trees. The final area is community engagement, and this is all about raising awareness and helping people understand what they can do to cut carbon and protect the environment. This includes trying to understand where people's challenges are, so what it is we need to overcome as a community, getting people involved in our projects and initiatives, attending school events, summer fetes and eco group meetings, we had a North Wiltshire Sustainability Day in Chippenham and a Sustainable Business event in 2018. We supported Wiltshire Council on climate events. For example, we organised the Climate Emergency Workshop at Sheldon School for Chippenham Area Board with about 140 people attending. And we're supporting people in taking positive steps to cut carbon and protect the environment. So the following slides I'll just really whiz through. They're just slides showing the kind of things we've been up to. So we've been in the news on with regard to our community PV scheme launch. We've had speakers at the Town Council talking about the threat that we're facing. We've worked with Sheldon School with their Eco Council on trying to get them to collaborate with us on projects. We've given away trees in the high street, been in the paper with our air pollution monitoring. These are some pictures from the kind of events that we've had. So in the town hall, on the streets, that was the North Wiltshire Business event. Give you an idea of how many different businesses attended. I think there was something like 60 or 70 businesses attending that event, and we had some very high profile speakers, including Molly Scott Cato, Mark Linus, Natalie Fee, and various others. These are sort of pictures from the community engagement events that we do. So we quite often have a game for the children to engage in, where they have to estimate which particular kind of food produces the most carbon, and they seem to be a lot better than the adults. And we get people to sign up to pledges and so on. This was the climate change event that we did at the area board at Sheldon School. As you can see, lots of activity, and we came out with a report that told Wiltshire Council what everybody thought they needed to do before they came out with their climate strategy. And this is in 2022. Our recent work, the beginning of this year, has all been around tree planting at Stanley Park and on some local farms. So just to wrap up, climate change is still the biggest threat modern humans have ever faced, and the fact is we're still heading in the wrong direction. But despite an inadequate response from the international community, it's essential we decarbonise as quickly as possible here in the UK, including doing everything possible at local government, local community and individual level. It can be a struggle to keep motivated in the face of what feels like a snail's pace progress, and the challenge to overcome our own cognitive dissonance that results from being stuck in a system that limits what we can do. But as it says on the fence there, if not us, who, and if not now, when? Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Nick, and well done for getting through all those slides. As a facilitator, slightly nervous here, but that was a brilliant job and super quick, so thank you. It's really great to hear of the local action that you've put in place to address climate change. Fantastic, phenomenal amount of work, incredible. And obviously, I assume it's not just you, Nick, that there's a whole team sitting alongside you. So, and some really practical action that's being taken, which you know, makes me feel that a lot of that might be transferable across the county. You know, how do other groups pick up and learn from that? I just want to, you know, acknowledge the amount of work, and you said at the end there, you know, how hard it can be, you know, when things are heading in the wrong direction and you're fighting so hard to turn it around. So just very humbling to hear that there's groups out there like yourselves doing this really amazing work. So thank you. I know we've probably got a couple of questions in the chat. So Sarah, over to you.
Before you do, I should acknowledge, you're absolutely right. We have about 50 or 60 people working in the background, and we have teams on each of those topic areas with some very dedicated people behind it.
Okay,
yeah, fantastic.
So straight into the questions. Mary's put a question in the chat regarding air quality. What is the group doing on the topic of the Westbury incinerator plans?
Yeah, I mean, Zero Chippenham has got a focus on Chippenham, and we're not a sort of Wiltshire-wide campaigning group. But personally, myself, I've been involved, you know, through as a Wiltshire councillor, and you know, been against the incinerator. I see incineration as not the way forward. We need to sort of reduce the amount of waste we produce and recycle what we don't, and not lock ourselves into an incineration system. But yeah, Zero Chippenham is not really a campaigning group. Wiltshire Climate Alliance is who she needs to go to on that. They have campaigned hard against the incinerator, and I can put you in touch with anybody there if you want to find out more.
Okay, following on from that question, is Zero Chippenham sort of the umbrella organisation for the other groups in Wiltshire, or how does that kind of fit in? So how are you set up?
I probably could have dwelled longer on that sort of map of other organisations. So we are a Chippenham-based organisation concerned with making Chippenham carbon neutral and reducing waste and pollution at the same time. So we do collaborate with other groups. So our PV scheme was so successful that Royal Eco Walton Bassett have asked if they could expand it. We could expand it to them, and they use the scheme as well. Similarly with Sustainable Carn. So we are pushing things out to other groups, but we're letting those other groups kind of franchise and run those sorts of things. So the umbrella group in terms of campaigning is definitely the Wiltshire Climate Alliance. That's the group you need to get in touch with. Most other climate groups or groups working on different aspects of climate and environment are part of the Wiltshire Climate Alliance.
Thank you. And very quickly, finally, how are you funded?
We have to work very hard for our funding. So we've done sponsored things to raise money. We've got a grant from Chippenham Area Board, which is part of Wiltshire Council. We've got I think we've got a grant from the Town Council in the past as well. So we just have to raise money. There's no income stream. We are registering as a community benefit society, so that when we do the community energy that I was explaining to you about, which involves selling shares, and that will generate an income, and we're hoping we can employ an officer through the income that's generated who will be able to sort of, you know, run that scheme and develop more other things as well. But the Community Benefit Society has an asset lock, and it's almost like a charity with a bit more freedom to sell shares and do commercial operations. But it's essentially, you know, keeping all that community benefit within the community.
Okay, thank you. I'll now hand back over to Amber.
Thanks for answering all those questions. Really great questions and really great responses. And just to highlight, yeah, Wiltshire Climate Action, people can find them on our Wiltshire Together community platform if you're looking for them. Contact details will be there. So moving on, invite Laurence Cable from Chippenham Cycle Network now to join us and tell us about the Cycle Network. Thanks, Laurence, over to you.
So hello, I'm Laurence. I'm the Vice Chair of Cycle Chippenham. We are a volunteer-run group, actually chaired by Nick, who you've just heard from. Our aim, very simply, is that we want to provide infrastructure that makes cycling people's default means of transport around Chippenham. Now, that's a very big aim. And, lots of people say, well, for example, not everybody can cycle. And we absolutely acknowledge that not every journey can be made on a bicycle, but there's a lot that can. Would also say, obviously, cycling is one of the most inclusive means of traveling, because it's obviously much lower cost than driving. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later on. But as a town, Chippenham is 3 miles east to west, 3 miles north to south. So it's actually the perfect sort of size for cycling. When you look at the sort of journey time comparison between driving and cycling over that sort of distance, it's actually comparable, particularly when you think about, with a car, you've got to drive around and find a parking space. You've got to go and get your parking ticket. You've then got to walk to wherever it is you're going, Actually, cycling becomes very attractive when you look at it from a time perspective. It's also much more predictable because you don't get stuck in traffic. We've also got a relative lack of hills in Chippenham, which, there's some, but we haven't got, some of the hills like Bradford and Bath and Bristol have. So, it's quite well suited to cycling. And we've got the basis of what could be a very good cycle network using low traffic streets and off-road cycle routes in the town already. So our aim is very much to kind of build on what's there and actually create a network that people who are not currently confident cycling on the road are confident to use such a network. So just briefly on who we are. So say we're voluntary run. We're not a charity or we're just a community group. We focus very much on picking out what the targeted interventions need to be to actually make those improvements to the cycle network in Chippenham. We are separate from Wiltshire Council and separate from Chippenham Town Council. That's quite important. We are formally recognised by both, though. Equally important, because to actually do what we need to do, we need that support from both councils. So I say supported, we're supported in terms of officer time from Wiltshire Council. So they will meet with us a certain number of hours a year to help us pursue what we're looking to do. Chippenham Town Council in turn provide us with meeting space to meet for free of charge. We don't get financial support from either council, except where we can apply for community grants like any other community group can, but there's no kind of regular stream of funding from either of those. And in terms of the makeup of our committee, we've got a real mix of expertise. We're quite a small committee because the skills that we need are quite specialised. A lot of the work that we do is sort of desk-based. It's about, looking at things like planning applications and understanding infrastructure design standards, what can be done, what can't be done within planning laws and things like that. So when you look at our committee, we've got a number of councillors, including Nick, and some other Wiltshire councillors and Chippenham Town councillors. We've got transport planners, we've got architects, we've got people with infrastructure expertise. So very kind of specialised on the sorts of things that we do as a group. So why are we doing it? Why do we all spend so many hours of our free time, helping to do these things that help people to cycle more? Well, first of all, as Nick was just touching on, we're in the midst of a climate emergency, and Wiltshire Council has published a climate strategy recently. And in there, it highlights that transport is actually the biggest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in Wiltshire, and short car journeys are going to be a major contributor towards that. So cycling can replace a large number of those short car journeys. That's what we're looking to facilitate. And there's sometimes a bit of a clash in the sort of public discourse between, people who are looking to invest in cycling, and they say, oh, well, that's kind of going against, the road lobby and people looking to drive. But actually, we always make the point that by getting more people cycling, it actually improves matters for people who are driving as well. Because if I swap a car journey for a cycle journey, that means fewer cars on the road. That means less congestion. That means less pressure on parking spaces. That means less pollution. And obviously, we're talking about the switch to EVs, but that still leaves the issue of the particulate pollution from tyres and brakes. So again, by taking those car journeys away, we're improving air quality in the town as well. So the environmental benefits is one of them. And the other kind of broad brush reason that we do this is around community well-being. So here you've got the obvious things like physical well-being. Cycling is physical activity. It's good for us, right? That's an obvious plus point for the individuals who cycle. There's also the mental well-being, of course, for anyone who cycles. You know, I certainly find that when I've had a long day at work and I then get to cycle out to collect my son from nursery, that's a real sort of, I can wind down from work and kind of switch into, you know, non-work evening mode, which I don't have on the days when he's not in. I have to go straight downstairs from work and immediately be daddy to a 4-year-old. So the mental side of it is really important as well. The third point there is one that is kind of why I got into this in the first place, which is about freedom that cycling gives people of all ages. So I grew up in the Netherlands, and as a teenager, I had so much freedom to just go out when I wanted, where I wanted, because my parents knew that I could go out and do so safely on the bike. So it was freedom for me to go and explore, do what I wanted to do. It was freedom for my parents, of course, as well, not having to be an on-call taxi service for me. So at that end of the age spectrum, it gives young people freedom. At the other end of the age spectrum, of course, you hear all these wonderful stories about people who are older and maybe not able to walk or walk as far as they once could. Cycling actually enables them to go further and do more than they could otherwise have done. So it's actually a real, you know, liberator for older people as well. And of course, for disabled people, you know, there's often this assumption that disabled people have to drive, they can't cycle, but actually that's not true at all. There's, you know, a lot of disabled people are actually able to cycle, and for them, the bicycle also becomes a really valuable, or I say bicycle, any kind of cycle, becomes a valuable mobility aid. So real freedom for everybody, and in particular, some of the most vulnerable members of the community. And this final point is an interesting one, and I've not seen any concrete research has been done on this, but I am seeing more and more anecdotal things coming out where schools are mentioning that people that cycle to school or walk to school are actually much more switched on when lessons start in the morning, better able to engage with their education. So I think that there's an additional benefit, you know, not only for those children who are better engaging with their education, but more broadly in that they are getting more from that education, and, you know, all the benefits that has for the economy as well. So that's probably why we're doing it. What do we actually do in terms of tangible steps on the ground? There's a few things here. We channel local and national investment into the right places as far as we're able to. We've had mixed success. We've done some really good things in the town, working with some of the local councillors around Chippenham. There's other things where we would like to have been involved a bit more in them, but we're working very hard to do that. Developments is a big area, because how often have we seen new developments built, houses or supermarkets or whatever, where they put cycle paths in within their site and then dump people out on a big main road where obviously nobody is going to cycle because they don't feel safe doing it. So we're looking, when we are planning applications come through, for example, for housing developments, we'll have a look at it and go, can you get to and from the site safely on a bicycle, to other, you know, nearby amenities within the site? Can you get around safely on a bicycle? Is there acceptable cycle parking if it's, you know, shops or leisure facilities? Is there good cycle storage if it's residential? And looking at all these things like that to make sure that the infrastructure is going in that actually enables and encourages people to choose the bicycle over the car. We are doing a lot of things to actually improve accessibility to the existing network. So we've got a lot of things like where there might be raised curbs that you have to get up to get onto a cycle path, or chicane barriers in the way. We're working to get all of those taken out so that it's actually a much more inclusive network. And then we're putting in things like cycle parking, route signage, and the signage is a particularly important one because it actually markets the cycle routes around the town. So by planting the seed in people's mind, if we can put a sign up somewhere that says, you know, town centre is 5 minutes that way, it plants in people's mind that, can I really cycle that? And it only takes me 5 minutes, and it starts to drive some of that behavioural change. So the signage is obviously a very visible and important part of what we're looking to do. So what we've done in terms of deciding where we focus our attentions is we've developed a network development map, which includes strategic and tactical improvements to the town cycle network. And this is anything from small scale interventions up to much larger ones. And so we kind of pick them off as funding things become available to do different ones. This has been included in the draft Chippenham neighbourhood plan, which is undergoing its sort of statutory consultation steps at the moment. And we're also, some of you may have seen that Wiltshire Council at the moment is consulting on these local cycling and walking infrastructure plans. I get the acronym right, LC-WIPs. And those, we're looking to feed this into that process as well, because we spent a lot of time talking to members of the community and other councillors about where the improvements are needed to be. So just to finish up with a couple of pictures of what have we actually achieved on the ground. We've been going for about 4 years, and in that time, so on the left-hand side there, you've got some example of some signage that we put up to actually let people know that that path is a cycle path, because it wasn't previously signed as such. The bottom left one is a dropped curb that we put in. You previously couldn't actually get onto that cycle path unless you could lift your bicycle or any kind of cycle up a raised curb. So lowering the curb means you've now got flush access all the way up onto that cycle path. We've got some new cycle parking. The one on the right there is an example of where we've had some developer contributions to community infrastructure, and we've said actually that this particular extension of a cycleway along the Bath Road was the best spend of that money. And then over on the left, here's a couple more. So you've got one of those chicane barriers that litters so many of the footpaths and cycle paths around the town. Those chicane barriers, interestingly, are in a lot of cases illegal under the Equality Act, because they exclude certain people from using them, including disabled people. So we are running a big program at the moment to have all of those taken out of the Chippenham cycleways and replaced with bollards where necessary, where access control for cars needs to be prevented. So that's a really good example of that. And that when we publicized that on Twitter, when that had happened, that got an enormously positive reaction. So, it's really resonating really well with people, some of these relatively minor, but actually really impactful transformations that we're making. And just lastly, the one on the right here. So that was through working through the planning system, working with Lidl. In this case, it was at Pewsham, and we managed to get them to agree to put a new cycleway in. Linking the new store back to nearby residential areas and the remainder of the cycle network. So that was another really good result that we got. Just for those who are watching and are aware of the new cycle infrastructure design guidance that says shared use is no longer encouraged, this was actually all designed and approved before that guidance came in, hence why it's taken the form that it has. But now, of course, we've got the really good new cycle infrastructure design guidance from the government that is a real step change forward in terms of the quality of the infrastructure that should be put in from now on. And we're really positive about hoping to try and get more of that around Chippenham. So if anyone's on the call and wants to get involved, there's a number of ways you can do that. We're looking for a number of specific skills actually to join our group at the moment, specifically things around fundraising. So anyone who's got experience of raising money for non-profit groups, that will be really good to hear from you. We're also, as we grow and are applying for more funding, we would be really grateful to have somebody who can sort of help guide us a bit more on the governance and the sort of policies and things that we need to have for some of this. So and of course, any extra experience around infrastructure design, planning, the planning system, anything like that, please get in touch. I've got some contact details that I'll put up in a second. Funding, obviously, if you've got money or are aware of any grant schemes that we could be applying for, please let us know. We'd love to hear about them. And finally, just suggestions for improvement. So, if you know Chippenham and you cycle around Chippenham or would like to cycle around Chippenham, but aren't because of something, because there's a barrier in the way or there's no cycle parking where you're going, or whatever the issue is, let us know and we can see if it's not on our map already. We can look to add it to our list of projects that we would like to do. So that's me. Thank you everyone again for listening. And there's our website there. If anyone would like to go and have a look, we've got some more information, some more sort of outlines of some of the things that we've achieved. And if you want to get in touch, please feel free, just send an email to hello@cyclechippenham.org and we'll go back to you and we'd be delighted to hear from you.
Laurence, thanks so much. I have to say, I'm so impressed. So impressed. It just the power of a group of volunteers coming together and being able to achieve so much. I think a lot of people out there think volunteers are all about tea and sympathy. And when you see the impact that volunteers coming together with their knowledge and skills and championing change in local areas, it's incredible. So, really, really humbling to see what you've achieved. Sarah, are there any questions in the chat for Laurence?
Just one question. So is the primary focus of your project more around cycle routes and signs, or do you help source types of cycles for people to be able to use those paths and things?
It's the former. That's a really interesting point you raise, actually, about helping people get access to cycles. It's not something we've looked at specifically, but no, so our focus is on the actual building of the routes to enable people to use those cycles. But yeah, there's probably a gap somewhere. Again, I don't know if there's other organizations that do this and that help people get access to cycles, because there's schemes like Cycle to Work, and a number of employers also offer, you know, tax-free loans and things like that. Various schemes help people get cycles, but there's Motability, and I'm not sure. I think that is only cars. I'm not sure if that offers cycles as well. But no, that's not something that we would that we do as a group. But it would be interesting to know more, because if we get other questions like that, to be able to direct people to groups that do have expertise in that area.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that was the only question. And thank you for that. I'll pass you back to Amber.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to use, Laurence, and I'm probably going to do it an injustice, but there's something around, if you think you can't make a difference, try spending a night alone with a mosquito. And that was just dropped into my head, thinking about, you know, the power that volunteers and organisations can make on the ground when we want to make changes. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
No
really
problem.
appreciate the presentation.
Pleasure.
So moving on, I'm going to invite Damian to come in from the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust now, and share a presentation on the work that they do. Damian, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Damian Haasjes. I'm with Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the trust. Now, the trust is actually quite a large organisation, and we have over, well, I say large, we have over 100 people working for us, though many of those work part-time. And the focus I wanted to talk about mainly today was around giving a short overview about the trust, but then speak about the areas of work we do, which are within my section, which is working with the community, and just to highlight some of those things, which a lot of people may not be aware that Wiltshire Wildlife Trust does. So this is a quick overview. So it was established in 1962, and there are a number of wildlife trusts that were established at a similar time, came after the release of the book Silent Spring, people might be aware of, and local people, the great and the good, wanted to do something. And that is why at the moment there's a number of wildlife trusts celebrating their 60th anniversary, similar to us. We have 44 reserves across Wiltshire and Swindon. Oddly enough, that's controversial. Some people would say 43, some would say 46, depends on how you split it up. But we've just got a new reserve that's opened in Marlborough called Bay Meadows that we're just starting to work on. So we aim as a trust to grow the number of reserves we have to create more land for wildlife and nature within Wiltshire and Swindon. We've got two key aims. One is to create large-scale living landscapes to support the diversity of flora and fauna across Wiltshire, and that incorporates things like purchasing more land, but it also means working with farmers, working with people in their gardens about using the land that's available to make that more wildlife friendly. And our second aim is to support people to live more sustainably and engage with the natural world and all of its benefits. And that really is the area that so much of my work comes under. The programs that we offer include everything from alternative education, adult wellbeing, water conservation, wild landscapes, which is basically it's a landscaping and design company that sits within the organisation. Volunteering obviously is the heart of what we do as well, and it makes a huge difference across all of the trust, and so much more. And oddly enough, when I first started working for the trust, the range of what was available is what I was most surprised by, given the size of the organisation. Excuse me for 1 minute. If anyone knows me, they will know I have a certain habit. That habit is to speak for longer than I've been asked to. So I'm just checking my stopwatch, making sure that I will go within the time I've been asked to do. Right. So focusing on some of the things that we do within business development and community engagement, we have got 2 care farms. Care farms are places where we work with children and young people and adults as well, though less so recently. And we engage with them in nature, in the natural environment. We use ecotherapy, we use forest school, we use farming, we use horticulture, really anything that we feel will benefit that child. And we work with that child and their parents and the school to create and design a bespoke program. We are, I think, now the largest alternative education provider in Wiltshire. I'll talk to you a bit more about that. But our 2 care farms that we own, one in the north, which is right in the middle of our reserve up there at Lowermoor Farm, and the second is just outside Melksham there, and that's called the Willows Care Farm. We just opened that one up last year. We specialise in student-led activities and play and creating a physically and emotionally safe space. What I talk about and what goes across all of our work is about creating safe spaces for people, helping them to engage with nature and the benefit that comes from that, and building up nature confidence. That as people work with us, no matter what area they work in, they start to feel more confident out in nature. And that means that they can go out in nature by themselves and they can gain that benefit as well. So we work with forest school leaders. We offer everything from things like fire lighting, whittling, woodland crafts, bees. We've got great beehives. And for some young people, that is exactly what they want. They've been really popular working with the bees. All of our staff are team teach trained as well, which means that if things get more difficult, our staff are really good at de-escalating situations, being able to work with young people and helping them to manage, I suppose, what we would call dysregulated behaviour, but when young people start to struggle. And we offer one-to-one bespoke packages, but we also do groups and we do a whole range of things. We work with children from right across Wiltshire and Swindon. Most of our young people come to us through either directly through schools or through the SEND team in the local authority, that's Special Educational Needs and Disability team. All of the young people we work with in the care farms have got education and healthcare plans. So that's where it's funded from that. But we do have some young people that come specifically, and then we do other things like we run events in the summer for the local community, and we try to make sure that our care farms and all our work is based within the communities that we operate. So we offer opportunities for the communities to use the sites as well. Our education team, our youth education and wellbeing team, they do a similar thing to the care farm, but they do it across the whole county. They're more peripatetic. They also do a lot more forest school, small group forest school and large group forest school. So that might be that they work with 15 young people. Occasionally what we'll do is we don't call it forest school, we call it forest school activity, where we'll work with the whole class. But true forest school, you really don't want more than about 12 young people, because forest school is entirely young person led. But then we do all the other stuff you expect. Educational visits to our sites. We at the moment, we are inundated. We have schools on our sites every day, which is fantastic after COVID. And we go into schools, we run workshops, and we do lots of those types of things. Most of our work, to be fair, again, young people we work with have got education healthcare plans or additional needs, and there's some money supporting that work. So that's how we pay for it. But what we also try to do is bring in a lot of other additional funding so we can offer free workshops to schools around particular areas, things like climate change, because we've started to do a lot of work around eco-anxiety in young people. And a big thing that makes a difference around that is helping young people to be empowered and understand what things they can do to make a difference. So we've been doing a lot of work around that. And those types of workshops we offer for free to schools. Then one of the things we've done for the longest is actually our adult wellbeing and mental health program. So that is in 2 parts. In Swindon, we have a lottery funded program, which is a 6-month-long program. So people can come on, they stay 6 months, and that works around, I'll show you in a minute, but that's all around ways of wellbeing. We collect people up so that transport isn't a problem for them. And it's all facilitated by staff who are trained in mental health and conservation. It's practical. You know, we did a lot of work talking to people, talking to groups, particularly talking to men, because that was an area when we started that we wanted to focus on, men's mental health. And what they said is, we are sick of talking therapies at the moment. That's not for us. So what we do is practical, but it's both. So as somebody's clearing and coppicing, they're talking to either the volunteer support assistant or to the staff member next to them about their anxiety, about what's going on for them. And it's that combination that works so well. But again, it's creating a safe space out in a natural environment. And I would say, you know, I was looking at one of our groups one day, had a group of guys, young women and men sitting around whittling, and they were sharing a whittling expert. Actually, I had young people next to that, and the whittling expert was going in between. But I looked across and I saw Nick, and I thought, well, there's two ways of looking at that group. One of those ways is to say, well, that's a group of people sitting there and whittling and being nice and relaxed. The other way, and if I put my sort of mental health head on, is to say that was a safe space, a group therapeutic session where Nick was holding that to ensure it was safe and people were sharing appropriately within that group, while at the same time making a wooden spoon. Yeah, and I think that's the type of example of the way that we work. The basis of it that we work with is things like attention restoration theory, saying that actually being in the natural setting makes a huge difference to people, and we know that underlies all of our work. And the biophilia hypothesis, which is essentially saying we need to be out and about, outside, and the fact that we are separated from that so often in cities and things has a negative impact on us. So we look at mental health recovery approach. So that's talking about hope, meaning, purpose, giving people control and choice, helping them to self-manage what's going on for them, but also take risks in a reasonable way, build appropriate relationships, and we work inclusively across all of the work that we do. And the basis of it is our 6 ways to well-being. Be active, keep learning, give, so that's like volunteering, connecting with others in the group, take notice, and a lot of that is things like mindfulness. And then care for the planet is the 6th one, and that's where we do things where we're giving back to nature. Finally, our UASC program, Unaccompanied Asylum Seeking Children's program, that is our UASC guys working with some of the older volunteers, spot the difference, which is which, out at Stour Head, when we did a joint bit of work with the National Trust. And the UASC program, its function and focus is helping unaccompanied asylum-seeking children to feel part of Wiltshire and the wider UK. And we say children because they're under 25 and they're vulnerable. In real terms, most of the young people we're working with are between 16 and 25. Okay, the designators looked after young people within the local authority, and that's who we're working with. We were commissioned by Wiltshire Council to do this, and we work in partnership with the Harbour Project and Youth Action Wiltshire. But we're the leads on this, and Youth Action Wiltshire provide residential and outdoor opportunities, and the Harbour Project offers some of our advice around specific things around seeking asylum, but also we use that as a base. And we offer activity support and a lot of education too. That's it for me. Hopefully I'm about on time, I think, and any questions, please feel free to ask.
And thank you so much, and thank you for keeping on time. Well done. Very hard when we've got a lot to share, isn't it? Very difficult to hone down, especially when our services are, the length and breadth of them are so comprehensive. I just wanted to say congratulations on your 60th anniversary. That's amazing. I personally really appreciate the reserves. You know, I've used them personally, both for teaching, but also just for being out in them. I find them amazing, the way they're looked after and supported. And just on your adult wellbeing work that you do, you know, I know someone who went through that program, who had been out of work for 10 years, had serious mental health issues, and spent a year with your team, is back in work and is mentally stable and well, just demonstrating the value of the work that you do. So, you know, really acknowledge that. So questions, Sarah, over to you.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple of questions for you, Damian. The first one from Laurence. The continued expansion of the towns is resulting in a lot of destruction of natural environments. Does the Trust do anything to work with planners and developers to incorporate more natural habitat into new developments, such as street trees?
Excellent. That's a question that we can now spend the next 3 hours talking about. But I think, Laurence, so being really trying to be very straightforward about it, Wiltshire Wildlife Trust decided a while ago that opposing everything doesn't work, because in the end, developers will just take you to court. They'll just spend, they got more money than you have, and they'll just push it through. So what we do now is we work with. Obviously, sometimes we don't. Sometimes if a developer is doing something that absolutely there's no way that we can work with them, we will oppose it, and we will actually submit opposition. And we've done that on more than one occasion. But our ideal way is working with people, and the aim at the moment of all development is that it should end up having a positive biological impact. That's the aim. There's two ways of doing that, one of which is working with developers. So good examples is the nature park and the work we've done at Tadpole Farm up in Swindon. So there's a nature park, there's planting, we've worked with them in the development of that, but also now we run and manage the nature park within that. And similarly in Trowbridge. Trowbridge is challenging because of the amount of increased housing and the repeated, how rapidly it's developed. But the aim of that is it's not just about that, it's also having staff on the ground to help manage those spaces, but also work with communities so they appreciate and understand what's there. So it's not just a dog track, that you can help to develop the community's understanding and awareness of it. And the answer is, it depends. Obviously, then you also have things like bio credits and that whole area of work now. But our aim is that when we work with developers, that there is a better natural environment within the built space. And then it's not just relying on these bio credits. Though, bio credits are important, and they are something that the trust will work with, and it's something that we're looking at. But yeah, I mean, that's the sort of shortest answer to that, but happy to have a longer conversation about it at another point.
Thank you. And one quick last question from Dr. Nick Murray. What needs to happen for the trust to bring back the State of the Environment in Wiltshire report? Is it a funding issue?
Okay, so we have been talking about that, Nick, and my honest answer right now is I don't know, but Gary and I were chatting about it, and we've got the Wiltshire Biological Records Office. We've got a new manager of the WSBRC. For people who don't know, that is where we do things. We host that office, and they record things right across the county. We have volunteers, another great example of volunteers who are experts, and they will tell us what different species there are. So we work with groups and we work with individuals who go out, they're called the county recorders, and they tell us what's in certain areas. So then if a builder says, I want to build a big development over here, we know actually there's great crested newt there. We know that there's a number of species that we really are worried about. That's not going to be an appropriate place to build. So that's what the WSBRC does. We are working on it. We're definitely looking to do it again, Nick. And I don't think it's just about funding. I think we're just negotiating at the moment, a little bit about funding, but we're negotiating on where it's at. And I don't know the when, but I can come back to you if you email me.
That feels like it's a watch this space, and we'll let you know. And maybe, Damian, we could get that out in when in our newsletter to let people know. So it's got a wider range of reach as well, in terms of, go and sip your cup of tea. I just wanted to add, it was really great to hear you say that, you've taken a different stance of working with developers and working with rather than against. And it's an interesting one, isn't it? That, working in a kind of strengths-based model, what works well when we come together and collaborate in partnership. And it was great to hear one of the outcomes that actually now you're running that area. I can't remember which one you cited. I didn't quite catch it, but where the outcome can be different if we start from a different standpoint. So it's just, sometimes we have to adjust the way we work, don't we, to get the outcomes we need. So really positive to hear that. So that is all. Thank you, Damian. Thank you, Linda and Nick and Laurence, for all that you've contributed. So that you are our final panelists for the end of our week-long Voluntary Sector Expo, and it's great to end on all of you with all that you have just shared. Really fantastic work. So I just want to sort of close really by summing up as best I can, and I know I'm not going to do any of this justice at all. Some of the key themes that have emerged over this week-long expo, things that have been shared, and I'd just like to share some of those reflections, if I may, on what we feel we've heard from the sector this week, apart from the amazing services that you have and support and ways that you work in the community, support the community. But it's really clear that the sector offers this real person-centered, non-judgmental and proportionate services that contribute really significantly to the health and well-being of residents in our county. And, you know, many of our presenters have highlighted the benefits they make to residents. You know, we've just heard from Damian, from improved confidence and self-esteem to being securely housed, to being able to live independently, you know, to receiving the benefits and financial support that they're entitled to, or, you know, simply being able to put food on the table for their family. You know, it's clear that the sector relies significantly on the support of volunteers, and we've just heard a lot of from our presentations how important volunteers are in their services. And we will know that behind the scenes they will be offering training and support to their volunteers in those roles, and that training that is provided will be of high professional calibre. So it really contributes to creating that kind of infrastructure and civil society, bringing in also those volunteers' knowledge and skills and experience that are really contributing significant change on the ground. So it's kind of like the unseen heroes, I always feel, unseen and unspoken. There's so much we see, and thinking about Laurence, the cycle networks. Often people in communities will think that's been done by Wiltshire Council and that there's no volunteer involvement. I swim in the mornings locally at my local pool, and the front gardens are all managed and tended for bees by a local voluntary group, and it's just a joy to walk past. But I know that they've done it, but a lot of people won't know that they've done that. So we know that the volunteering roles in the county are really many and varied, and that everyone has something to contribute to support their communities and local voluntary sector organisations. But we mustn't lose sight that alongside the volunteers, there's a whole team of highly trained professionals who deliver essential services in our communities through their charities, through their grassroots organisations, through the village hall schemes, a huge plethora of staff running essential services that are the backbone of our civil society in Wiltshire. But we are now starting to see the signs, that's what we're hearing already, of the cost of living crisis, the impact on local organisations, not only seeing the demand on their services, but also on their own organisations as they're facing increasing costs that need to be met somewhere from their funding, within their funding. And obviously we've seen over the last couple of years that those organisations, those charities and community groups that raise funding, events not happening, and we're seeing the struggles that those organisations are facing. In terms of increasing demand for services, we're also now hearing from the sector across this week that there is a much wider section of society that may not have previously been impacted due to the legacy of COVID, and now the increase in costs due to the cost of living crisis. So this is combined for charities with this growing need, these challenges with the growing need to continue to recruit volunteers whilst residents have less time, have competing pressures, which may include that they now need to take up part-time jobs and steady their income. So there's been a lot of discussion and reflection around, you know, where we are, what we do, how we flex, and one of, I think, our strengths in the sector is we're very agile at adjusting to those things that emerge. Most charities, we know, are first responders in times of challenge, but the challenge now is if charities and groups in the sector are unable to continue to run effectively, that they may actually end up closing due to the cost of living, and the impact then on the most vulnerable will of course be devastating. So we've also heard evidence over the week of the significant impact the sector services contribute to the health and well-being of residents. And this is a positive, and how much those services are also saving statutory organisations funding, just by the very nature that we go out and source funding from elsewhere to deliver services to the residents in our communities. So on a positive note, there is very strong evidence of collaborative and partnership working. Damian, you've just mentioned a number of those collaborations and partnerships in some of the services that you lead on, but work alongside others. And I think we're very good at that in the sector. We're very good at providing holistic provision by working with those other partners that we can align ourselves with. And a real desire, I think, to develop this further, showing how this kind of holistic approach across agencies can really support those with multiple barriers. So what a fantastic week. I can't tell you some of the things that we've heard over the week, real strong evidence throughout this week's presentations that, you know, the voluntary and community sector are really walking the talk, and, you know, and really I heard heartily about how we include those with their lived experience in areas of service design and delivery, making sure that what we do deliver is fit for purpose according to those that need our services. So this week we've heard from over 35 organisations, and we hope it's given a real taster of some of the work that the voluntary and community sector offers residents living and working in Wiltshire. But there are literally thousands of organisations contributing really essential services and activities to improve the quality of life for all those in this county. And I really wish to acknowledge all those that have contributed this week in helping raise the profile of those services that are offered, but also want to acknowledge all those that couldn't join us simply because we couldn't accommodate them all. Thousands, you know, we've managed to get 35 organisations here today, this week. We hope to be back next year with another opportunity to share more of their work with you. We also want to just thank all the participants who came to hear more about the sector and pose some really interesting questions for the panelists, and we heard some of those today. You can catch up and revisit any of the presentations. They will be on our YouTube channel, and we will send out information to everyone about how to link into that. You can find all the organisations that you've heard from this week on our Wiltshire Together community platform. So if you're looking for an organisation and want to make contact, please go and check out our Wiltshire Together community platform. And that's where you'll find them and be able to find their contact details. If any community groups or organisations are out there and wish to join any of our networks or forums, please do get in touch with Wessex Community Action. We'd love to have you join us. And if you want to keep up with information, please sign up to our newsletter so we can keep you abreast of the events and opportunities and news, both from all the organisations here and others beyond, sharing and networking, information, events, activities and research as well. And finally, but not least, I really, really want to acknowledge the work of my team here at Wessex Community Action. This is the first time we've hosted an expo. It's been a huge amount of work for them all. They haven't cried, but they have worked extremely hard behind the scenes to pull this all together. And we, like many of the organisations, are a really small team. But I hope you will join me in acknowledging what a great job they've done all week to make this such a huge success. So I think that's enough from me. Thank you so much for joining us all this week. And we hope you'll be in touch with us all in the future. All the very best to everybody out there, and please acknowledge the voluntary sector for who they are. They're a great asset to this county. And we're certainly one of the organisations that are very humbled to be working alongside many of them. So all the very best. Take care.